What's going on, everybody? We are back. We got episode number 111 of the Club and Sub podcast. This week, we're going to be talking about UFC 280. Before we hop into it, if you want a 50% bonus up to your first $1,000 deposit at betonline.ag, use the promo code Club Sub. Tonight, you got me, John, at MMA Fox, Lags at Danny _ Lags. Luke is away on business, so he will not be joining us tonight. We were supposed to be joined by our former co-host, Quinn, but Quinn is sick as well. So just going to be the two of us holding it down. And, I mean, it's a great card to hop into it. UFC 280, on paper, and from a watchability standpoint, it's maybe the best card of the year. Any thoughts from your end?
Yeah, that's actually a great starting point, really. I thought, like, when they were putting the card together, it's like one of the best cards of the year, potentially. And actually, when they were putting the card together first, I was actually thinking I was going to have a ton of betting spots, but but going through tape and whatnot, I don't feel too strongly about that. But it's a fun card nonetheless.
Yeah, I agree. Before we get into it, guys, please, if you like the show, drop a like and subscribe. We'd appreciate it. It would help us out. But we're going to be trying some new things in the new year. Going to change the format, might change a bit. We'll see. It's going to be fun, though. And this show is going to be fun, I think. So we'll get right into it here. UFC 280, Makhachev Oliveira. We're in Abu Dhabi. 10 a.m. start time. Unfortunately, I have to be at a 1-year-old birthday party that day that I cannot get out of. So I will be watching on my phone, but I will definitely be making sure to tune in. But yeah, first fight of the night. We got Lena Landsberg. She's taking on Carol Hosa. Honestly, I just said this to you before we went live. Had I taped this a bit earlier, I would have laid the juice on Hosa here. I think minus 250 was fine. I think minus 220 was great. Lines up to minus 330 now. I think that's more or less right. Landsberg she's an older fighter. She hasn't looked good in her recent fights. I've seen some takes that, she fought well against Kanzad, except when you watch that fight, she really got owned by Pani outside of her hurting her at the end of round 2. So I don't know. It's like historically what troubles Hosa are very good grapplers, and Landsberg's not really that. To be honest, if anything, I think Hosa's got the grappling upside in this fight. I guess theoretically maybe Landsberg could cause some issues in the clinch, but personally, I don't really think enough to trouble Hosa too much. Hosa's output is really kind of crazy. She averages like 7.5 significant strikes a minute. Better grappler, like I said, younger, getting better. I think it should be Rosa all day. Wow, what do you think, Legs?
Yeah, I parlayed Rosa, to be completely honest, at minus 300. Still think there's value like where we're sitting right now. I think she should be around that 4-1 mark. Like you touched on, really, like her Landsberg's path to victory here is more like clinch, pushing against the cage a little bit, kind of like how she did with Pani fight in the second round. But that's kind of where the rubber meets the road, really. I don't see any takedowns coming from her side, so I think it should be a very easy fight for Rosa, quite frankly. And I guess what will give me pause on the decision line is because I do feel that she could have enough success standing to TKO. Or I know she doesn't have any finishes in the UFC, but wouldn't shock me here.
Seems like she's declining precipitously, and so at 40 years old, yeah, to your point, it's like would it be shocking if Rosa finished her? Not really, I don't think so. But that actually could be a pretty fun fight. Moving on, we got an interesting one here. I know you have a bet. I might have a bet. Might be on the opposite side. We may have some contention here. It's Muhammad Mokaev taking on Malcolm Gordon. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, narrative aside on Gordon's chin and durability issues, I rate Mokaev's pressure and his wrestling pretty highly. I mean, we were all on Johnson really in the last fight. Solid all around guy, could test him a little bit, but Mokaev was on him from the jump. Really didn't give him any space to breathe. I kind of think that's a similar case here. I have a unit on the under 1.5 minus 105, and that doesn't start round 3. Got a unit on that minus 124. I think Mokaev finishes him pretty early, quite frankly.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of issues with the money line here, even though it's up to like minus 1,200 now. I mean, the thing is, the guy like Mokaev, he's gonna just absolutely own the guys he fights until he fights somebody that can counter grapple. I was pretty impressed with him against Charles Johnson, if I'm being honest. Obviously, I had a decent amount on Johnson in that fight, and that was obviously quite a poor bet. I think where I disagree with you a bit, I'm kind of intrigued by the over, just because I actually do think if Mokaev stands with him, he hits hard enough to spark him very fast. that I actually think is a very live outcome. But I guess for me, like I could, Gordon's not good, but he's he's a black belt. He's got like 20 years of submission grappling under his belt here. It is possible, and I kind of think at 125, you could have a competitive striking exchange or two, and then Mikhail just decide, okay, I'm going to take the path of least resistance here and go to the grappling. And maybe he does just dumpster him on the ground, but I also kind of feel like nearly even money for Gordon to potentially be able to just have to survive 7.5 minutes on the ground with a black belt. I'm kind of interested in it. I haven't decided if I'll play it or not, but I'm leaning to the over a bit here. Um, Moving on. No, this is a banger. We got Armin Petrosian. He's coming off a loss to Caio Bahio. He's taking on AJ Dobson, who's coming off a loss to the bane of my existence last weekend, Jacob Malkoon. I bet Dobson here. I bet him at an earlier number than this. I still kind of think there's some value on it. I've seen all the takes that Dobson's bad, and I can't disagree with that. From an MMA perspective, like I don't think Dobson is some great mixed martial artist, but he is a very athletic fighter. And on the other side, you have Petrosian, who's a very good striker. I actually rate Petrosian striking quite a bit, except he is hittable if you go forward on him. He can be cracked. I don't think he's the most durable guy ever. Obviously, Gregory Rodriguez, you don't yeah, he got hurt twice by Robocop, but how much stock do you put in it? But if you actually go back 3 fights ago, he fought a Hatef Moel on the regionals, and who was not good, and he got iced about 30 seconds into that fight. On top of which, the big issue with Petrosian,
minute and a half into that fight.
Minute and a half. Sorry,
you're good. No, you're good.
I was a third of the way there. But if the big issue with Petrosian's always been his grappling. Like obviously the guy's got very weak hips, but he will give up his back to get up. Yeah, striking wise, I think it's just Petrosian. From a minutes perspective, I expect Petrosian to win minutes on the feet here. He's got better output. He's a much better technical striker, but he is hittable. And Dobson is a very good athlete whose boxing is clearly improving and who hits very hard, and he will go forward on him. And so standing, it's like the two of them are going to probably slug it out. So while I do favor Petrosian on output, I think Dobson has some upside to hurt him here or finish him. And Dobson could get to have some grappling success here. I could see Dobson landing 2, 3, 4 takedowns. Will he control him? Probably not. But it's like those dynamics, it's just so hard for me to see how Petrosian should be near minus 200. It's like his upside is either a quick KO or he outpoints Dobson. And there's a cardio argument for Petrosian as well. But even that, I'm not so certain Dobson's cardio is bad off the Malkoon fight. I mean, that was a grueling fight. And it's not like he flat out quit in it either. So I don't know. I think with a guy with the defense of Petrosian and a guy who's as proactive with his aggression as Dobson, I'm kind of happy to take the stab. I think it's a decent dog. What do you think?
So I'll keep this a little short. I'm on more the side that Dobson is not very good, and I was more.
I agree.
And I was more so liking an under problem or hoping for a decent under, I should say. But the under was, minus 200. So yeah. I just really have no interest. It's a pass fight for me. I agree with pretty much everything you said in terms of the Petrosian, better, cleaner striker. I think, decent size favorite. Petrosian's okay, personally. But, yeah, pass fight for me.
I guess the one thing I'll say is it's I agree with that. And I think Petrosian's I think he has higher upside for sure in this division. It's just – it's so hard to be a big favorite with the tools Petrosian has in this kind of a matchup, because of the defensive issues, because there's probably grappling upside on the other side, and he has none himself, I could look like a fool here. I know sharp people who like the Petrosian side, but personally, I'm rolling with AJ here.
Yeah, I guess what I would add on to that is, I guess, at least my perspective, I don't think there's a ton of wrestling upside for Dobson, so.
Yeah, but we'll see. I mean, we'll see.
Right. Yep.
I agree in the sense that I don't really think there's a scenario where we hindsight look at it and Dobson's got 9 minutes of control.
Yeah.
But a fight where Dobson lands 3 or 4 takedowns and gets 2 minutes of control, that I can imagine. And yeah, but
all right,
TBD.
Yep.
Moving on, we got a Bubakar Nurmagomedov. He's taking on Gadzi Omargadziev. Any thoughts here?
Battle of the frauds. That's really, I would say that's the best way to categorize it. It's two guys that aren't very trustworthy. I don't think are very good. I think slight to medium favorite. Abubakar is fine. Like he's got decent striking. It's a mess of a fight, really. I don't want any part of it.
Yeah, I agree. I was. It's funny. I before I taped it when I saw the line, I was like, "Oh my god, Abubakar's going to kill this guy. Like this is a pretty big bet." And then you tape it, and it's just like he doesn't have many impressive performances. Like even the fight with Jared Gooden was more just Gooden kept his hands down and tried to stuff the takedowns, and he just jabbed him for 10 minutes of that fight. I don't. I worry about Abubakar's grappling in that I think he can get takedowns here, but dude, the guy's found himself in some awkward positions on the mat with good grapplers before. I can so easily imagine Godsey just like rolling for a heel hook and getting it here. Like it is very easy for me to picture it. With that said, I do think, like you said, slight to medium favorite's fine. I think he's better everywhere. Both guys want to wrestle. He's probably the better wrestler on the feet, he's probably the better striker. I just think Godsey brings a potent enough offense, both in terms of, yeah, he's not a good striker, but he throws everything into every shot he throws. And I'm not sure Bubakar's got great striking defense. And like I said, in the grappling, Godsey's an opportunistic grappler. He'll attack stuff. And we've seen, Bubakar got triangled by David Zawada. Like how confident can you be with someone who's going to attack submissions, So it's a pass for me. I think the line's fine. Moving on, we got another guy from the Dagestan crew here, Zubair Tukhugov. He's taking on Lucas Almeida. Honestly, I'm not sure what to make of this because I am very anti Tukhugov in general. I respect the skills he has. Obviously, he's explosive. He hits hard. His entries on his takedowns are quite good. As a pure wrestler, he's quite good. But as an MMA grappler, he doesn't throw ground and pound. He doesn't attempt submissions. Doesn't put hooks in. It's like when he gets a takedown, he gets there, and then it's just kind of like, I'm going to stall this out until the official stands me up. Like that's basically the story of his wrestling in the UFC. On the feet, a lot of power, throws heat, but only really throws hooks. He's there to be hit by straight shots. And on top of it, he's got a terrible gas tank. So he's always a guy, generally he's a negative minute winner who relies on, his power and or lay and praying to win fights. And then you have Almeida, who I was actually pretty impressed with his performance against Trezano, but I do think Almeida also is the kind of guy who can be held down on the mat here. And I can easily imagine this being, a rerun of the Lerone Murphy fight where it's like, maybe Tukhugov is outskilled, but he can get the takedowns easy enough that he can just stall out 8-9 minutes and win this fight. Plus, Almeida can be cracked, and Tukhugov hits hard. And then you factor in the fact that, Tukhugov's just fought a much better strength of schedule than Almeida has in their careers. I would have been, like, I think the line's about right. I don't think there's a ton of upside on the Tukhugov side, personally. Like, if anything, I'd be tempted by Almeida, but I just haven't seen enough to be comfortable. What do you think?
Yeah, kind of in that same boat, really. Like, kind of what you started off with Tukhugov, not like really anti Tukhugov. Same way. Like, don't really like him, never bet on him. He's a guy that just doesn't throw a lot. He's not really a guy that's diving on legs. And even when he is grappling, like you touched on, he's laying and praying. So it's like, I don't know. He fights way too close to his opponents. And on the Almeida side, dude cracks. But like you touched on, I think while Tukhugov is fresh, I should say, he can grapple him, I think, pretty easily.
Yeah.
So I think anybody that likes Almeida's side, I guess it's not really a hot take. Wait live, to be honest.
I like that.
I don't have a great read pre-tape, though. I would say, like you said, I agree the line's pretty much right.
Yeah, I like because it's like you just said, if you bet Almeida, you're basically just accepting he might get taken down 6 times in the first 8 minutes of this fight, and or just held down, and so it's like at plus 250, maybe I'm willing to just fade his cardio pre, but yeah, I agree. I think wait on live is probably the best way to go where the line currently is. Moving on, banger of a fight here. We got Volkan Oezdemir. He's taking on Nikita Krylov. What do you think, Legs?
Well, I have a little bit of a sore spot with Mr. Krylov after kind of fumbling the bag against Paul Craig and what I thought was pretty much an easy stylistic matchup for him, and then dives right into the triangle. So I don't know. Like he's just more of a front runner kind of guy. I do think it's a probably good matchup for him, but it's also one where I'm like, I'm so anti-chalk on Krylov anymore. Like, I want no interest in his fights.
Yeah, it. Speaking of fumbling the ball against the bag against Paul Craig, Volkan tried to fumble the bag for me against Paul Craig, but did not. That was like one of the sweatiest 30 to 27s I've ever bet big on. I never felt good at any part of that entire fight, only for it to be a clean 30 to 27 win. Yeah, I don't know. There's a part of me that's kind of tempted by the Krylov side here, just because I do think he has all the upside, right? If he just hangs on the outside, kicks and jabs, and then just uses his wrestling to try to break pressure, I'm not sure Volkan has a lot to offer him. The truth of the matter is with Volkan, I kind of think even though he's a solid 205er, he's always been a bit overrated for the division. He's kind of a mediocre athlete who just hits hard and does things fundamentally well. But every time guys have demonstrated a high level of skill, he just generally hasn't had the ability to get over that hurdle. He did with Rakic, but I think we all know he probably deserved to lose that fight. And despite Krylov's problems, and as you mentioned, the aforementioned bag fumbling against Paul Craig, I actually think he is very, very skilled. He's a good wrestler. He's got a decent submission grappling game. He's a decent striker. I think he's still getting better, to be honest. I just look at this fight, and it's like the best case scenario for Volkan is stuff all the takedowns and either knock him out, which I think is fairly low percentage. I don't think Volkan hits that hard, to be honest. Despite the nickname, I think he got it off of 2 quick KOs, and we haven't seen any real demonstrations of, one punch power since those KOs happened. And so Volkan, it's like stuff all the takedowns, edge a close decision or knock him out. Whereas Krylov could also win the close decision where he can't get takedowns, could also finish Volkan. He's probably more durable, if we're being honest. And if he gets on top of him, I think Krylov can absolutely wreck him from that position, to be honest. And so I think I just think the upside on the Krylov side is a lot higher. I'm kind of hoping the line comes in a bit. I'm a bit surprised to see it where it is, but I lean Krylov here. Moving on, though, interesting fight. We got Mahmoud Muradov. He's taking on Caio Bahia. Funny story. I initially, before I taped the fight, I put 2 units on Muradov plus 220. I then taped the fight and immediately cashed out those 2 units that I had bet on him. Yeah,
No, go ahead. I'll get to my point eventually.
I have never been the biggest Mahmoud Muradov fan to begin with. I always thought the gas tank was a bit sketchy. I thought the defense, if you actually were able to shut down the movement, was kind of sketchy. And then we saw in the GM3 fight, well, I think he has decent first level takedown defense. I think once you get inside on him, he's fairly easy to take down. And I struggled to know how much stock to put in the GM3 fight because he was tired. But what we did see from him on the ground in that fight was quite ugly. And so I don't really like Muradov skill-wise. And on the Bahia side, look, this kid's promising. I don't know what he is on the feet, but I suspect he's a decent striker. He minimizes exchanges at least. And on the mat, he's quite good. Very good submission grappler, very good back taker, above average wrestler for a Brazilian. And look, you know what you're going to get with him, right? He's not going to sit back and just exchange with Muradov for 15 minutes. He's going to chase takedowns. And I think if he gets on top of Muradov, which I do think is likely at some point in this fight, even if it takes 5 or 6 minutes to do it, I think he's going to just dominate from those positions. I actually kind of think the line could be a little short on the Caio side. I haven't decided if I'll bet it or not. I was kind of hoping it would come in more. But I think he's a deserved decent sized favorite here. What do you think, Bugs?
So it was funny. I'm talking over you a little bit in the beginning because I actually very similar thoughts. Pre-tape, I was like, all right, Muradov, pretty decent sized dog. Like, all right, fade to step up in competition. Then you run the tape. It's like I actually think Caio can cover this line. He justifies it in the grappling. I mean, what we saw in the GM3 fight, which you did cash a big bet on, which he's allergic to pressure. And Caio can bring that in spades in the grappling. I think the only real problem I have with his striking is he's got a little bit of tall man defense, backs up a little bit, just kind of. But in terms of the grappling, I think he runs away with this, quite frankly. So he closes out my parlay with Rosa at about even money. Got a unit and a half on that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's also like Murdoch is not the guy who's going to just go forward and pressure him to the fence and take advantage of that, you know? He'd rather be on the back foot. It's just weird because I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, I was probably too harsh on Murdoch. Like, this is probably just disrespectful. But you go back and watch those fights, and it's like gassed out at a nothing pace with DeJericho. But Trevor Smith, who was a corpse and never fought again. Andrew Sanchez win hasn't aged great. I didn't think he looked great in that fight, to be honest, prior to the KO. And then he gassed out 6 minutes in the last fight.
And to add on to the Andrew Sanchez fight, it was one where he's not attempting a ton of takedowns either.
Yeah, none. So really, I think, yeah.
0 for 2.
Yeah, so it's. I wanted to get on board with a big dog shot here, but honestly, I think the favorite's going to run things. I really do. So we'll see. Moving on. Interesting fight here. We got Bilal Muhammad. He's taking on Sean Brady. Legs, what do you think here?
Definitely the hardest fight on the card to call, quite frankly, I think, because at least from my perspective, I don't think there's a ton of grappling like upside for either guy. Maybe you could say Brady has some early, but quite frankly, I think it's almost a wash. And in terms of striking, I think it's close. Obviously, Brady power upside, hits harder, but I think ultimately it is a close fight. So it's a pass for me. I mean, I would lean the Bilal side, if anything, though, quite frankly, the dog.
Yeah, I'm considering a bet on Brady. I'd like ideally better than minus 125. The best number on the board is minus 130 at the moment. I do think Brady's getting punished a bit unfairly for the Chiesa fight. You have to contextualize things a bit, right? They only spent about 6 minutes of that entire fight at range. And so people are like, Chiesa pieced him up. It's like, well, I mean, he landed a couple 1-2s, but Chiesa, first of all, he's a giant. He's very tall. He's the epitome of the guy who will never step in the pocket with you, right? He's just never willing to get in there and mix things up. And so, that's kind of an awkward matchup for a guy like Brady, especially against the Southpaw. I don't think he fought any Southpaws prior to that fight, if I'm not mistaken. But other than those striking exchanges, he absolutely owned Chiesa on the mat, which I think was surprising to a lot of people, myself included. And if you look at the other fights in his career, his striking is a lot better in those fights. He looked good striking against Matt, or solid. I wouldn't say good. I would say he's a solid striker, right? But he's never looked that bad any other time. And even the gas tank, he slowed down in the last 60 seconds of that fight after absolutely dominating for 14 minutes prior to that. I don't know. I look at this fight, and to me, I love Bilal as a fighter. But Bilal, if he doesn't have grappling upside, which he does not here, in my opinion, he's reliant on winning a point striking fight. That's what he does. He has no power. He's relying on standing on the outside and trying to just outpoint you over the course of 15 minutes, which I think could happen. Don't get me wrong. But I think if any guy's got grappling upside here, it's Brady. Do I think he's going to dominate Bilal in the grappling? No, but I wouldn't be surprised if he landed 2 or 3 takedowns and got, 4 to 6 minutes of control. And even in the striking, I think Bilal is a better striker. But again, he's not very threatening. He's not going to hurt Brady. And so I'd expect minutes will be close anyway. And we've seen Bilal hurt a bunch in his career. And so I think Brady could hurt him. And so you have a fight where it's like Bilal's upside in this fight is what? You really couldn't put him past minus 125, right? I can't even see.
Yeah, no, that's kind of where I'm at too, because it's a close fight. No matter how you put it for a Bilal win, likely it's a close decision. And so the margins at plus 115, plus 120 that it is now, it's not tempting at all.
Yeah, and on the other side of things, if you were to extrapolate what the upside is for Brady, well, if he turns out to be an even better grappler than we expect, he could theoretically be a big favorite. He obviously has the vast majority of the finishing upside in this fight, and he probably has the big moment upside too. So I kind of think Brady minus 150, minus 160 is kind of fair here. But I think it's probably a close fight. But I'm somewhat interested in betting Brady just on the fact that I think he's got a lot more room for a dominant win than Bilal has. Moving on.
I was going to say, if you want to talk about narrative a little bit, Muhammad, in Abu Dhabi.
It is a Muhammad in the Middle East. That is true. But the Middle East scorecards traditionally have been quite pretty even keeled. So we'll see what happens. I would like to pull that narrative out a bit later in the
Yes, I
card,
know,
though,
yeah.
since we do have an Islam in Abu Dhabi as well. um, great fight here, though. We got Katlyn Chikagian. She's taking on Minan Fiorot. What do you think?
Man, it's kind of I'm kind of where like not to say I'm like the same boat where I was in the last fight with Bilal, but it's kind of the same thing. Like I want to bet Chookagian by decision at plus 250 because ultimately I think this is a close fight, but it's also like her upside is a close fight. Like she doesn't have dominant. Like I guess that's the thing about Chookagian. She doesn't dominate girls necessarily, but she also never gets dominated other than when she's gotten finished both times. So I don't know. It's a mess of a fight, really.
Yeah, so I'm pretty much exactly with you because my initial reaction to this fight announcement was I'm definitely betting Chikagian. But then you think, and look, obviously I bet Maya against Manam, but I mean, Maya was plus 400. There's a huge difference between saying I need my fighter to win 1 in 4 times to be value and 35% where Chuk is, where it's like I need her to win one in every 1.5 fights, or one in every 2.5 fights for it to be value. Like 20% and needing her to be a 40 to 45% or so is a huge difference. And to your point, I think there's a lot of good reasons to bet Chuk here. She's obviously fought the much better level of competition. Like there's no question about that. And beaten the much better level of competition. She's got high output. But like you said, Chuk is so harmless. Like very similar. You made a great comparison to the Bilal fight. It's like she is. If Chuk comes out here, like Chuk outlanded Maya in their last fight. I believe it was like 75 to 55 by 20 strikes. So we have a common opponent regarding who their last or who a very recent fight for Chuk and the last fight for Manon. Whereas I believe Fiorot outlanded her at distance like 85 to 35 in that fight. And that's not like everything. You know, that's obviously not the entire analysis, but it is a decent barometer to say, hey, Manon should be able to be competitive on volume here, you know, in my mind anyway. And so with that dynamic, if you're telling me Manon's likely to compete on volume, and I do think she is, like, let's not forget, Chookagian allowed Jessica I to land 90 strikes against her and outstrike her in that fight. She allowed, a while ago, but it happened, she allowed JoJo to land 111 strikes against her. So I think assuming the volume side of things is going to be competitive is fair. Well, I think we can both agree most of the power upside is on the Fiora side here. So that favors her in a close fight. I think most of the grappling upside is likely on the Manon side too, to be honest. I think she's a better wrestler. I think she's a lot more physically strong than Chikagian is. So I think if anybody's going to land takedowns here, it's going to be Manon. And the finishing upside, I think, dramatically favors Fiora. And so while I do think Chikagian is the more skilled fighter, I think her margins in a win are tiny, whereas the only one in this fight who has wide margins are Fiorot. Am I betting Fiorot at minus 200? No. I put her around minus 185 myself. So.
And then, so to add real quick on those, the striking numbers. So Chuk outstruck Maya 72-52, and then Fiorot over Maya 83-37.
Right. And it's not, again, that's not everything, right? Match styles matter, matchups matter. But it is, I think it gives us a decent barometer in terms of we've seen them fight Maya in roughly the same state, and at least volume-wise, they put up commensurate numbers to one another. So we'll see, but I'm with you. I mean, honestly, I would probably bet Fiorot at like minus 150, to be honest. I won't bet her before that, but like I think I would take the poke at minus 150. Moving on, we got Dariush taking on Mateusz Gamrot. I know you have a bet here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I got a unit on Benny plus 170. I mean, really the glaring, like the elephant in the room here is the cardio, but I don't think it's like crazy. Like, don't get me wrong. I do think Gamrot probably wins round 3 at a decent clip, but like, I don't think Benny's gas tank is that atrocious, quite frankly, that I think this is a fairly competitive fight early. And even when he is tired, he's a guy that will push through adversity. So ultimately, I think it's a close fight, and it's a prove it to me spot for Gamrot, quite frankly, because I mean, not just to extrapolate a little bit, but I quite frankly thought he lost the Saryukin fight. So,
Yeah, me too.
but but again, close fight, and I think this is a close fight. So give me plus 170 on Benny.
Yeah, so it's funny with the cardio thing. I feel like I brought this up when we broke down him and Ferguson, but it's like if you actually look, he's won the last 3 or 4 round 3s he's been in. I feel like he's one of those guys when he starts sweating and breathing heavy, like he looks he looks way more tired than he is, but he continues to push the pace and generally be pretty effective. The only fight we really have in Benny's career where cardio looked like a major problem was the fight with Evan Dunham, and that's because he almost finished on him in round 1 and went off trying to finish him. So with that said, it's an interesting fight. And again, I'm thinking about Benny. I haven't played it. I'm not 100% sure, but I agree with you. I mean, look, first of all, I love Armin big, but the reality is Armin, one of the reasons I love him is because of his wrestling, not because of his striking. And Armin was winning the striking clean early in that fight. Like, I'm very, very confident if these guys stand, Benny's going to outstrike him. I don't even think it's that close between the two of them. Even circling back to Gamrot's fight with CDF, Gamrot was slowing down and CDF was starting to put it on him in round 2 before that really strange finish. I just think, Benny's just got a lot more to offer on the feet. I think he's more dangerous. I think he's got more finishing upside there. The big question for me, and I said this to you before we came on, I don't really know how Benny's going to fare against a real wrestler. Like, you go through his career and he just hasn't fought any really, The closest thing I guess you have are Jim Miller, but Jim Miller not physical enough to athletic, to beat Benny. And I guess Chiesa, who submitted him, but that was years ago. So I have really no idea what's going to happen here. And so I guess when thinking about this, it's like I'm probably going to bet Benny, to be honest, just because if you wanted to think of their upsides here, I think Benny's is as wide, maybe even wider than Gamrot's is. But I do think there's an argument that Gamrot could potentially pace him, grapple him, and hold him down. Do I think that's likely? No. But again, he's a jiu-jitsu guy, and we just haven't really seen him on bottom against a wrestler, So will he play guard? I don't know, really. I hope not, but, it's something that's possible. But largely, I agree with you. Look, Benny's the much more proven fighter here. And in a 3-round fight, I think you have to be on the Benny side, to be honest. Moving on, this is a potential banger. We got Peter Yan. He's taking on the Sugar Show. Sugar Show and O'Malley. I bet O'Malley here. 1 unit plus 300. I actually think the line now getting close to right. Maybe a tad of value on O'Malley where it is here. Look, Peter Yan is the best bantamweight on earth. I'm not going to disagree with that. Even over my boy Aljo, I would favor Peter Yan against any bantamweight in the world. Guy's a complete truck, good at everything, great pressure, great cardio, great attritional work, great power, great grappler. My thing is, it's a 3-round fight. In a 5-round fight, I would not be looking to add or to bet O'Malley at all in this kind of a fight. But it's a 3-round fight. We've seen Yan start slow in many, many fights. We know Yan, despite his pressure, sometimes can be happy to let guys get off volume against him. It's happened a lot. I always bring it up every time we talk about Yan, but go back to the Jimmy Rivera fight. He got outlanded in every round of that fight. He won it because of knockdowns. He was very close to losing a decision. He was 2 moments from losing a decision to Jimmy Rivera throughout that fight. It happened early in the Aljo fight. The second Aljo fight, the first Aljo fight, outside of the knockdown in round 1, Aljo was pretty easily voluming him the first 10, 11 minutes of that fight before he slowed down. And so I look at a guy like O'Malley, say whatever you want about him. Look, he's annoying as shit. I agree with everybody about that. But the guy's striking metrics are insanely good. He's huge for the division. He has a high output. He does an incredible job minimizing exchanges. He can fight on the back foot, which not many guys who Yan have fought can fight on the back foot. And he hits pretty hard. And so, again, I've seen people say, Jan's going to grapple him. Well, Yan didn't grapple Corey Sandhagen, who gets blown over like by a gust of wind. Like, you're telling me he's going to grapple O'Malley here? Maybe, but I don't think there's a lot of data to support that. he might land a takedown or two, but I'd be surprised to see an extended Jan grappling performance. And on the feet, it's a 3-round fight where the higher volume fighter is O'Malley. Sure, he should regress quite a bit stepping up in competition against Jan here. But the reality is, if this fight goes the distance, it's probably pretty close. It's probably going to be a fairly high volume fight. I think both guys have the ability to hurt each other here. I give Jan a lot more finishing upside, but I do think O'Malley could hurt him standing. And I don't know. Like, I favor Jan down the stretch pretty significantly just because he's proven to be able to fight aggressively in high tempo fights, whereas O'Malley hasn't. But to me, in a fight with a size difference like this, with two guys that can both throw volume, and O'Malley who's very sharp, it's unless you think Jan's going to come out here and land 4 to 5 takedowns and get 8 to 10 minutes of control, I don't really see how you could possibly line him past minus 200. What do you think?
Interesting fight. I kind of think like where the line is now, again, like we were touching on, it makes a little bit more sense. Like the 4-1 opener on Jan's, like, but I don't know, man. I keep going back to that last fight with O'Malley with Munoz, and Munoz won that first round quite clearly, and it was just an ugly, bad look.
It was terrible.
I know, and again, I'm not here advocating for minus 270 Jan, but it's like I think minus 200-ish is about right. I at least in terms of like looking at other in terms of other props and stuff, looking at it, I think the under 2.5 isn't a terrible look at plus 170.
I like that a lot, actually, to be honest with you.
That's not a bad look. But again, I just think it's one I'm fine passing. I think it's a great fight. Intrigued to watch it. No interest betting it.
I will say about the Munoz fight, though, in fairness to O'Malley there, like the fight before he fought Paiva, who came forward on him, and he obviously lit Paiva up. Munoz basically refused to engage, which, I mean, it won in the round to his credit, but he fought in a very un-Munoz-like manner, and I kind of think it threw him off a bit. I mean, I'm not really expecting Peter Yan to not engage here. I mean, I think he's going to come for him early and often, but we'll see. I agree. I think minus 200 is completely fine, like, in terms of lining this fight. Another fighter you got to bet on, though. We got a banger. Our boy, Aljamain Sterling, Long Island's own, taking on TJ Dillashaw. What are your thoughts?
Well, first thing that's got to be said, we were talking about Peter Yan, though, but Aljo's his daddy, though, 2-0.
He is.
Cheers to that real quick. But aside to this fight, I kind of think it's a constant theme with this card. I don't think Aljo has a ton of grappling upside himself in the fight, so I think it's a relatively close fight, quite frankly. So if you're going to give me plus 150 on TJ, I think it's more willing than the shot. I know he's coming off a knee injury, but he's been off for over a year now, so I think he's had more than enough time to heal. Again, not a huge play for me, pretty small, but I think it's a competitive, close fight.
Yeah, so I don't have a bet here. I never got the number I wanted with Aljo, and now he's out to like minus 180, so it's a pass. I actually get where you're coming from. If it was Sterling against Dillashaw at his peak, I think I'd favor Dillashaw, to be honest with you. My thing is, when looking at the fight, it's like, let's go back. If you go back to Dillashaw's last fight, granted he got hurt early in the fight. I mean, that has to be said, but he's not going to have any time to be able to rest in the clinch against Sterling. That I'm very confident in. You're right. Sterling may not have much grappling success against Dillashaw, but I'm very confident Dillashaw will not have any success grappling Sterling in this fight. In terms of the fight itself, look, I've always been higher on Aljo striking than I think the market. I think at Dillashaw's peak, he's obviously the clearly better striker, but the truth is he's 37 years old. He's off a major injury. He's off, the steroid suspension. His floor here, like, I think Dillashaw's ceiling is potentially like minus 150. Like, we could look at it and be like, Dillashaw should have been a slight favorite in this fight. Like, it would not surprise me. But where his floor is, like, we have Aljo, who's at the peak of the sport and is one of the 2 best bantamweights in the world. It's probably not better than Jan, but he is, 1A after Jan's 1, And I kind of think, when I rewatched the Sandhagen fight, the one thing that stood out to me is I thought Dillashaw's reflexes at range defensively, not off. I actually thought his offense, even hurt, looked pretty good. The way he follows up, 2-3 and puts 3-4 shot combos together at the end, I actually think could give Aljo some issues with his head movement only kind of defensive approach. But I did think Sandhagen was able to land clean a bit much, which was some cause for concern in that fight. And I kind of think Aljo, like if his defense continues to slip, Aljo might just be able to, just volume him pretty easy here. And I do think Aljo's volume doesn't really get enough credit. Like people only remember the first Yan fight because, how it ended, but they don't remember that Aljo outlanded Yan at distance in that fight. They don't remember that last fight, he also outlanded him at distance. He had 2 fights with Peter Yan, and I believe outlanded him at distance in both of those fights. So does that mean he's going to win? No, because I think, or Yan outlanded him at distance last fight, but it was close. Sorry, but I do think he probably has more equity in the striking than people are giving him credit for, and I think he has all the grappling equity. But with that said, I think it's probably a close fight. I just think the floor for Dillashaw is a lot lower than what the floor for Aljo is. But it's a pass for me. I understand the Dillashaw angle. Moving on, we got the main event, though. This is the fight everybody's been waiting for a while. A lot of spicy opinions on both sides. I saw someone put out a tweet, and I saw you respond to it as well, talking about the fan bases for this. And my response was, I didn't know Makhachev had fans. Like, I think that is what I don't, I think there are people betting Makhachev, but I didn't know that guy had fans. I sure as hell am not. I cannot. The dude is boring as shit, But I have a big bet on Islam Makhachev here. He is boring, but I honestly think Charles is tailor made for him. I'll leave a lot of meat on the bone for you here, but just more or less, look, Islam is I won't say probably. He is the best wrestler at 155 pounds, maybe the best wrestler in the sport, and he blends it with MMA grappling very well. Similar to Khabib, and unlike most of the Dagestani guys, they don't just have the dag wrestling. They blend it with jiu-jitsu tremendously. The guy's great on top. He consolidates position well. He's a finishing threat from everywhere in top position, both in terms of ground and pound and submissions. Look, yeah, he's got some defensive holes on the feet. And I think early in this fight, Charles could come forward and just nuke him with aggression. But Charles doesn't defend takedowns well. I don't think Charles is going to take Islam down here, given how hard it was for Arman to take him down. I think Charles ends up on his back pretty quickly. I know a lot of people are tempted to say Charles can threaten him from guard, but man, if you watch that Kevin Lee fight, his guard gassed out Kevin Lee, did not have much of a hard time riding Charles out on top here. Yeah, I think unless Charles clips him earlier and managed to catch a guillotine, I guess he could sweep him into a back take, but unless he catches him with something, I think Islam gets on top of him pretty easy, grinds him out, and eventually finishes him. I think he should be a big favorite here. What do you think?
So I guess I'll talk about the side first. I would have played that number, minus 150, like similar to you, if I would have gotten to the fight earlier. But yeah, where the line's at now, again, I think it's probably still some meat on the bone, but I don't know. It's such a high level fight that like if I don't have the number, like a good number, I'm totally fine with passing. I do think it's a solid grappling edge for Islam. I would rather target a violence angle, quite frankly, if there was a decent one to play. But the problem is with that too, again, you're kind of getting fight. Like I was looking, fight doesn't start round 4. It's like minus 190 now.
What do you think of the under?
I think the under 2.5 is interesting because I guess talk about narrative first. I've been on all 3 of Oliveira's last fights, either the under 2.5 or the doesn't start round 4, because the dude comes forward, throws hard, and the dude has insane submission ability. And quite frankly, I think Islam is just as likely to finish this fight as people are giving credit for Charles finishing the fight. So I think it's kind of interesting. I think the under 2.5 is not a bad look, but I think it's also one I think that could just sneak over, and you're just like, well,
it could. I would think so. Full disclosure, I have 5 units on Islam, but I was thinking it's like a decent soft hedge because I agree with you. I actually think Islam is probably going to sub Charles, to be honest with you. I think people forget how many times Charles has been subbed in his career. I honestly, because like let's be honest, Charles still has gas tank issues, whether
Right.
we like it or not. And the truth is, while the Poirier fight was fought at a high pace, it wasn't fought at the kind of grueling pace that this is likely going to be. With him on bottom, basically being suffocated. I kind of like the under because he covers the Charles. I mean,
Right.
dude, can you see Charles winning this fight in round 3 or later?
No. Like there's not
Yeah,
like honestly, like quite frankly, again, similar to what you said, I think his path to victory is clipping him early, quite frankly. I don't know. It's an interesting one, quite frankly. For
yeah.
sure.
I mean, honestly, that's how I feel. Like, I feel a little uncomfortable saying what my full opinion is about Charles's chances in this fight because I feel like
I go
if
ahead. We have a
he
ton of time still.
if he comes out here and knocks him out like immediately, I'm gonna feel like a complete schmuck. But I do not think his chances are very high here. I honestly think the line should be like Islam minus 3 to 400. If I'm being honest, I just think, like you said, it's like if Charles doesn't clip him early, I think Islam gets on top of him. And I've seen people, our boy Quinn, one of them, who like the clip of Moises briefly taking his back. They don't show the full clip though, where Islam does everything perfect and gets him off his back, no problem. Like I think Charles can submit him, sure, but this is not Dustin Poirier, who he's going if he gets his back, he's going to submit. Like different level of wrestler, different level of submission grappler. I really think Charles's chances of getting a grappling based finish are pretty low unless Islam's hurt.
And listen, I know this is a cold take, but like, I don't know how you watch the Kevin Lee fight and not think that Islam is where like the line where it's at now, maybe even a little bit wider. I mean, I get matchups are matchups. I understand that, but Islam is a much better grappler, much better cardio, and on the feet, the guy limits exchanges. Lee was getting tagged nonstop when he
Yes.
slowed down. So yeah,
Well, that's it. Do you think is like Lee was clearly he rode out top position fine, but like he was
2 rounds.
clearly getting annoyed and bothered by the heel hook attempts. I do not think Islam is going to be getting bothered by heel hook attempts here, to be honest. He's probably going to pound his face in if he starts trying to fish for a heel hook. Like that's the again, and I am a big Charles fan and I'm a big Islam hater. I just like I struggle so hard to see how Charles could be. What's his implied odds now? About 35%. I just don't.
I think the highest I'm seeing is about plus 167 on Bet Online, and then as low as plus 135.
Yeah, so he's about 30, somewhere between 35 and 40%. I don't. I just. I can't think of how that could be the line here. How he can that could be his chances here. I really don't. I think I don't want to say slip on a banana peel. I wouldn't say it's that extreme, but I do think he needs to hurt Islam very quickly in this fight.
And I guess, and not even like that you're getting a ton of meat on the bone from where the money line is where it's at now, but like, tell me why you shouldn't, if you're on the Oliveira side, why shouldn't you bet him inside the distance at plus 185?
I would much
Is
rather have that.
is he winning a
honestly.
decision? Is he winning a decision? I struggle to see that.
Unless Islam explodes his knee, like I don't really see how Oliveira wins the decision. But I mean, he could. I mean, look, I will say we did say this about every time I say something like that, I get like dreams coming back of like Francis Ngannou winning a decision via wrestling. So it is MMA. Weird shit happens. Like if you like Islam, just play the money line.
Yeah, no, yeah. I'm saying for the Oliveira side, quite frankly, but yeah.
So
well, because I guess to add that the Islam inside the distance is about even money.
Yeah, I don't think is bad, and I do think he's gonna eventually break him here. Like I'd be really surprised if Charles is under Islam for 20 minutes without getting finished. So
yeah, nope, totally agree with you. I think the under is probably a decent look, and I may end up having a small play on it myself.
Yeah, I think I'm not a huge unders guy, but I think it's a pretty good hedge too to an Islam bet, or like a soft hedge where you could obviously easily cash both your Islam bet and the under, but it kind of covers your ass in case Charles does nuke him early in that fight. So anyway, guys, that's gonna do it for tonight. Great card this weekend, 10 a.m. Do not forget that Eastern
Mimosas
time.
and waffles.
Mimosas and waffles are UK boys. They get to actually watch a card and hang out with their families that night. That's exciting stuff. Everybody's happy, except for the Charles fans. I'll be happy because I cashed a bet. I'll be very sad for Charles. Thanks for coming out, everybody, though. If you like the show, please drop a like and subscribe. It would help us out. We'll be back same time, 7 p.m. Eastern, going forward every week. Next week, decent card. Good main event. We'll be back to talk about that. But, guys, good luck this weekend if you're with us. Good luck if you're against us, but I hope you lose if you're against us. Anyway, guys, have a good one. Peace.